What a great time it is to be a student at the African Leadership Academy. We have heard many times before that Africa is in need of courageous leaders to change the continent. Well, what better opportunity than now for me to talk to you about what is, I would say, one of the greatest challenges of leadership in Africa: populism. Populism is a political approach that appeals to ordinary people who believe that their concerns have been disregarded by the government. Populist leaders tend to propagate the narrative of us versus them. Us, the people, versus them, the government. Now you might ask me, how do I feel about populism? Well, I was in 4th grade in Uganda, eager to participate in my first school elections. Colorful posters adorned the walls with slogans like "United we stand, divided we fall," and "Taking back our power." I must admit, as a 9-year-old, it was pretty exciting. And now that I look back, slightly unsettling to witness such fervent campaigning from children of that age. It just goes to show how deeply rooted populist rhetoric can be, and how much of an inspiration our leaders are to the young people. But what struck me the most were the speeches that were given during the open campaigns. In massive assemblies under the sun, candidates would take the center stage and one by one would proceed to tarnish the administration that has been neglecting its students, promising change and raising fists in the air with cries of "our power" and "we shall dismantle the system." As you would have it, the winners were those who garnered the loudest applause. However, once elected, their roles boiled down to mundane tasks like monitoring lunch lines to make sure that everyone got only one plate of food and making sure everyone was silent during prep time, a far cry from the grand promises they made to us during the campaigns. So this pattern repeated itself in high school. Candidates would craft elaborate manifestos, deliver impassioned speeches, only to falter when it's time for actual leadership. The excitement of campaigning quickly dissipated when it came to time for actual leadership. Funnily enough, these leaders would become the targets for the next candidates during the next election cycle, who would talk bad about them in the same way that they did. So, fast forward to 2023. Now I was the one running for the chairman of the student government here at ALA. My opponent was very formidable, tapping into the electorate's deepest convictions and pains with such fervent passion. I, on the other hand, initially positioned myself as a moderate, appealing to the people's listening and leaning on my leadership track record. But my opponent's fiery approach was gaining ground. And so I made a strategic decision. I decided to present myself as a moderate with a side of fierceness, best of both worlds. But as you'd have it, I still lost, but not too badly though, by about 5 votes. So there I was, defeated but intrigued. I couldn't help but wonder, why is it that radical leaders always have a higher chance of winning elections than leaders who are moderates? Well, it seems that these radical leaders, those who make bold promises and present themselves as crusaders against the status quo, are very good at capturing our imagination. We all know Donald Trump. He promised to make America great again, / to put America first by bringing back jobs, by building a wall to keep out illegal immigrants from Mexico who are taking jobs of the US citizens. He promised to repeal Obamacare, which was a burden to the taxpayers of the United States. And he promised to fight corruption. His main message being he is a defender of Americans. No surprise, Trump wins the 2016 US presidential elections. Jacob Zuma, president of South Africa from 2009 to 2018. Zuma was known to use phrases like radical economic transformation, expropriation without compensation, and opposition to the white monopoly capital. His main target audience being the disillusioned black South Africans. With 2 terms in power, it just goes to show that the people had a lot of belief in him. So I can go on to name many such leaders in Africa, but here's the thing. Have these leaders been effective at delivering on their promises? Jacob Zuma, he failed to implement any policies that fundamentally challenged the racist and capitalist systems that oppress the black majority. There was little to no semblance of wealth redistribution, and in fact, his tenure was plagued with corruption scandals, for which he was tried in court right after being forced to resign. Donald Trump, he left office as one of the most polarizing and controversial presidents in the US history, having faced a record 2 impeachment trials and having low overall approval ratings. And so we can clearly see a trend. Populist leaders make overambitious promises, proceed to successfully get elected, only to falter when it is time for actual leadership. Now you might be wondering, why does this matter? And why does this matter now? Well, it matters because the stakes are incredibly high, especially for a continent like ours. As we all know, Africa is the youngest continent with some of the fastest growing economies. For us, good leadership is no longer just a luxury. Good leadership is a necessity for us to be able to tap into this burgeoning potential. But good leaders will not spawn out of thin air. All of us have a role to play in contributing to Africa's enlightenment. And I believe all of us in this audience today can contribute to this enlightenment in 2 ways. Firstly, it starts with you. We must scrutinize the information that our leaders throw at us. We must go beyond the hype of populist rhetoric and be able to assess leaders based on their track record, based on their integrity, and based on their ability to deliver pragmatic results. Instead of being swayed by speeches, those with promises of utopia, we must consider the background of these leaders. Interestingly, in 2007, Sam Carnell wrote this book titled Going Public, in which he asserted that modern presidents spent a great deal more time than their predecessors preparing presidential addresses. It just goes to show how much politics has become a game of popularity. And so more than ever, a good speech or a popular speech is simply a bad indicator of how good a leader is. Secondly, I believe that we must engage in political discussions every day. And through these discussions, we must disseminate the enlightenment that we have gained. But here's the challenge. The challenge is reliable information. We all know that in today's digital age, misinformation spreads rapidly and goes on to influence people's opinions, people's mindsets, and eventually decision-making in elections. And so more than ever, there is a critical need for us to have voter education initiatives to make sure that voters are well-informed on their candidates, well-informed on the status quo of their countries, and on what a leader can and cannot do within the scope of their office. So, I believe that the future is bright. If we are able to do these 2 things that I recommend, I believe we are becoming more conscious about politics. If there's anything to pick from this talk, is that we must become more conscious about politics. I believe if we do this, we're striving for a future where we look beyond the hype of populist rhetoric and assess leaders based on a holistic and informed point of view, and where effective leadership will lead to positive results for all of Africa. Thank you.